Alrighty, guys. Those of y'all that are going to be lucky enough to join us live, I should say. We are in store for a wonderful show. We've got Mr. Rick Estes. He was, quite frankly, he was all over the place, but I'm going to let him better describe that when he takes over here in a minute. But to better know, Mr. Rick Estes was a CCN recon vet. He was the 1-0 of RT Crusader, and I will have in the show notes. He was honored enough to be interviewed by the world famous Joe Galloway for the Library of Congress, and as well as in one of the sawcasts with Tilt. So I will have both of those linked into the show notes to where y'all can catch those, because those are wonderful interviews that go quite in depth with Mr. Rick. But enough of my talking. Let's have the veteran get into it and share a little bio on himself. And first of all, thank you, Mr. Rick, for taking time to join us today. And the floor is yours, sir.
Thanks for having me. I grew up in Southern California, and I was in college for probably 6 months or so and got bored, and the Vietnam War was rolling out. So rather than go to college, I joined the Army. And I didn't have any idea at that time of being NSF or anything else. In fact, I didn't really know anything about the military. My folks didn't have a military background. So I went in and then volunteered for SF while I was going through basic training, and got diverted to jump school and then on to training group. And that's where Tilt and I met. After our phase 1 training, we went to commo school. And Tilt was, we went through the same class. Then their volunteers were, they asked if somebody wanted to go to Vietnam. If you wanted to go to Vietnam, you could raise your hand. 25 of us did. Excuse me. 25 of us did. And we showed up in Vietnam after a special class at Fort Gordon, Georgia. We showed up in Vietnam in around April of '68. And then what happened was I almost got sent off to a leg unit by just through the bureaucracy there at Cam Bay. And then I got myself over to the 5th Group headquarters in Nha Trang. And saw, of course, at that point, we all gathered back together for the most part. There wasn't quite 25. There was, I think there was 22 or 23 of us that finally made it to Nha Trang. And that was just for administrative reasons. We had 2 or 3 guys that got sent off someplace else. And then I think probably most people have heard the story about us volunteering. Not there at Nha Trang, but later in Da Nang, and how we got into SOG. So they didn't tell us anything, but if we wanted action, the word was, if you want to stay busy, if you want lots of action, go to Macvsog. And they wouldn't give us any details, and they brought us all together and asked us to raise our right hand. I say they. I think it was a sergeant major that did it, and we raised our right hand and swore to secrecy, and off we went. We got sent off into different directions. I may be going too fast, but that's kind of the way it went. I went up into I Corps and reported to Khe Sanh through a. I reported to Khe Sanh through a kind of a crazy series of events, and then I showed up and stayed there, and I was a radio operator there that entire time. And then when we closed Khe Sanh down, I went to Mai Loc. So briefly, that's it. Then from Mai Loc, I went to Da Nang. So, in a nutshell, that's kind of what I did. That doesn't include, of course, my running or any of that. But I mean, that's the background to how I got to CCN.
And like you said, I think you actually kind of covered that wild intro to you getting to Khe Sanh, which I think maybe when we get to Khe Sanh, we can kind of cover a little bit of that, which is just absolutely crazy. But when I remember you mentioning you joined in 1966. I believe you said, being from California, you went to basic at Fort Ord, and as
That's
well
right.
as AIT at Fort Ord.
Yeah, yeah. Infantry AIT, yeah.
Okay, and one of the very, very interesting things, we hear all this, or I've heard all this stuff about guys with glasses and stuff like that. I never knew it until Tilt spoke about it, or you spoke about it with Tilt. But you're colorblind.
Right, right. I was colorblind. And in those days, they were much stricter about being color. If you were colorblind, they didn't want you in a combat MOS. And I think that came out of some World War II and maybe Korean War experiences. But you'd get bounced if you were colorblind. So when I got in, I didn't know I was colorblind until I went through the test there through the military. And they took me from infantry, which I had signed up for, and said, pretty much, if I signed up on the buddy plan to be an infantryman, and they said you can't be an infantryman, so I said, well, put me someplace. I still want to go in the Army. So they made me a clerk typist. They didn't make me, that they were going to set me up for a clerk typist school. And I was able to volunteer out of that commitment during basic training, and went back to the infantry AIT, which I started with. If that makes sense.
Yes, sir. I mean, in a wild roundabout way. I mean, uh, when you ended up getting to, because you went to jump school down here in my neck of the woods in Benning,
Right.
and is that where you originally came across special forces?
No, there was a track. We had a presentation, SF recruiters, during basic training. And I actually, when I raised my hand, I said, I want to do it. I didn't take into account, I knew that I'd run into problems, but you don't get unless you ask. So they processed me through and then put me on a track sending me to jump school and then on to SF training. So, and they overlooked the whole colorblind thing became a non-issue, and I wasn't. So that's how that happened. But if I
Were
hadn't raised my hand, I would have been a clerk typist.
Oh man, imagine how history would have been completely altered with that. I mean, uh wow. Um did you I'm going to end up showing a great picture of speaking of training group. Did either in any of your military training, including when you got to training group, did the color blindness come into effect at any time? Did it hinder you a great deal to where you had to compensate on something else to maybe help push you through that, or how did that go?
No, it didn't. It didn't. It didn't ever come up. It didn't seem to be a problem. They started changing the way they were testing color blindness. Actually, while I was in the service that first 3 years, and they would instead of they would use some lights, colored lights, and you could call out the color that you saw, and so I didn't know, it was never a problem after that. Yeah, as best I could tell, anyway.
Hey, you're still here and in good health and rocking and rolling, so evidently it didn't.
Yeah.
And we're joined by a prior guest of the show, CCC Hatchet Force member Terry Cadenback. He said because he had glasses, he wasn't supposed to go to jump school, and so much for that.
Well, they were all, they were in a hurry. I mean, we were moving it along. They needed, Vietnam was starting to heat up in '66. It hadn't peaked, but they were starting to feel the pressure. So they needed recruits.
Yeah, and same story, kind of another famous story of Mr. Doug Gottschall. Same way, they gave him heck for it, and sure enough, he's running recon. I think even at Mai Loc as well, maybe FOB3.
Yeah, Yeah. Doug showed up. He came in a little after I did, I believe.
Wow. Great man. I was fortunate enough when I got to meet you at SOAR in 2022, got to meet him and George Sternberg. Two
Yeah.
great men. Two great men. Um, when you at that point in time when you were getting with training group, because there's actually one important thing about training group that I was wanting to ask. When you get in, you are, if I'm remember correctly, you are a commo man, correct? You're commo MOS.
Yeah, you pick that as you're going after the initial phase. You pick your specialty. Yeah.
Okay,
And
and you
I chose it. I'm not smart enough to be a medic, so I picked combo. It worked out.
and you had some not only guys with you that everyone knows in your commo, but in your class you had that went on to medic. You had some pretty big names that I'll show some pictures of that were went on to be some pretty heavy duty SOG men in their own right.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
with if I'm again remembering correctly, you and Tilt were in commo together. Is
Yeah.
that correct?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. We
Okay.
work together.
And I believe I've got the photo. I know there's another one right here, but wasn't the famous Paul Villarosa y'all's commo teacher? Or
He was an instructor there at Bragg. He was our commo instructor. He was quite a legend, quite a legend in commo. So
and is the legend true that Tilt shares that he had the famous tattoo?
he had lots of tattoos. He had lots of tattoos, and uh, I, I can't tell you that I saw that particular tattoo, but he was. That's the one thing that you remembered because it wasn't common in those days to be all tattooed up like it is now. So anyway,
No, not at all, and especially in if it's true, and the one he had, definitely not in that way, because that's a pretty. Although my father was a grunt with up in I Corps with the Marines,
oh yeah,
and his gunny had it on his neck and his arms, and said "if found, cut here," and I said, "My God, what dark humor!" And
the
especially that.
Villarosa was famous for his commo ability there at Bragg, and I even heard that he could operate the key and transcribe, with one hand, two hands going at the same time, and so he was quite a legend. This is
That
all before he came over to Vietnam. So.
That is unbelievable, because I've heard from numerous men that were in commo and just how hard that is. I mean, I've attempted to listen to it and see if I could just mess around and try and pick up anything remotely. And that is that's some tough stuff. And thank goodness you had some good commo instructors and did so well, because as we'll find out here in a bit, it ended up coming in handy several times actually.
Yeah.
Let's see. I did have let me show that training group class, because that is one heck of a training group class. And this is from Tilt's book, guys. I'm gonna have the book. I believe it's not on the ground. Oh, I'm sorry, I had it right here. Across the Fence. This is Mr. Rick is featured in Across the Fence. And as you can see here, we've got December of 1967, Southeastern Signal School at Fort Gordon. Many of the men here went to FOB 1, 3, or 4. Rick Estes, far right, front row with the mustache. Mark Gentry, world famous for CCN and CCC, Halo and Static Line. Richard Jennings, John McIntyre, Tilt, and Rick Coward with S2 New Jersey, and Bob Garcia from Khartoum. What a group of men right there in one photo.
I think that's Jennings up in the far right, up at the top. I believe that's him. I can't see it. The screen here is a little smaller, but you were asking about.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, that's wonderful. I'll need to make a note of that, because I was searching as I said, I still need to go through Intruder in case he's there. But Wow, that's a great class, and it's so neat that a lot of y'all ended up together at some point in time. Not all of you per se, but most of y'all ended up at least for a time. You, Tilt, Lynn, Mark, uh, Mr. Jennings, clearly, several
Yep.
others. It's very, very neat. When you ended up getting passing, and of course getting your beret and becoming a special forces Green Beret or qualified Green Beret, were you immediately sent to 5th group, or did you go to another group and have to find your way into 5th to get into Vietnam? Or
No, the sequence, no, basically, before we graduated, they asked for the volunteers, anybody that wanted to go to Vietnam, because you didn't necessarily, when you came out of training group, you didn't necessarily go to Vietnam. You might go to Germany, you might go to Panama, you might stay there on the hill. So the sure bet was to volunteer to go to Vietnam. So that's what happened. We 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 were sent down to Georgia. And then we had to leave before, and then I went to Vietnam. So I had no group other than the 5th when after I came out of training group.
wow. Okay. So, and you mentioned you go to Georgia and then you have your leave. So literally once you go to your leave, or you take your leave, do you report back to Bragg and then straight to
No,
Vietnam? Oh,
no, I flew up to Fort Lewis, Washington. No, let's see here. No, I guess not Fort Lewis. I think we went out. We was flying civilian, and we went right out of the Seattle airport and
oh,
flew but it was a military. It was a military flight, but we went right to Cam Ranh Bay.
oh,
Right
wow.
into Cam Ranh Bay, yeah.
Okay. And at that point in time, because as the years go, I get different story on how things work. And I know you mentioned in your biography that's a common or your intro. Guys are worried about getting snatched up for into leg units that are specifically wanting to go into the projects or CNC, I should say. D- how did you go about that? First off,
Well, what happened was they offloaded us, and I went to the airport. In Cam Ranh Bay, was a massive facility. I mean, it was a small city, maybe not even that small city. A lot of things going on, and you really are disoriented. I didn't know what to do, so I started asking around, and I was ahead of the other 25 guys by one day. And how that happened or why it happened, I don't know. But I was separated from the other, so I had nobody except myself to get it figured. And I was standing around, and I asked an NCO. He said, "Go get in that line over there." And I looked at the line, and so I'm asking around, saying, "What's this line for?" And there was some infantry outfit. They were basically just processing you into the infantry, and I could see where the whole thing was headed. So I stepped out of the line, got the hell out of there, and waited until I could see a guy with a beret on. And when I did, he says, there's a liaison office here at Cam Ranh Bay that picks the SF guys up and sends them on to Nha Trang. So that's what happened. I went over to, I said, no, they're trying to put me in a leg outfit. And they said, no, we'll take care of it. So that's how I got to Nha Trang.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank goodness. I love hearing about how the special for even you young guys coming in that, the salty old guys that necessarily don't have to look out for y'all or anything, but if they can either tell y'all are wanting or wanting to get into action to making sure y'all get to the either
Yeah.
5th group or
They had a liaison office for dealing with kind of exactly uh, that situation. So, so anyway, that's how I got to Nha Trang. So lucky.
um there was a quick question. I've got a picture of Tilt I want to show from training group, but if I remember correctly, you were pretty good. Even Tilt says you were great in your commo class, but Jason wanted to know, Tilt spoke about Mr. Paul happened to help him and Johnny McIntyre, I believe. Did you have to get any help from him, or were you pretty
No,
on the
I
ball?
was, my speed was in what I think what we're talking about here is the speed, the send and
Mhm.
receive. And it got up to where it should be pretty easily. I think Villa Rosa, they did have remedial help, and I as I remember it, I don't think I needed too much. It was there's nothing high speed about it. They sat you down and they started you to listen to code, and it just went on and on and on until you got up to. And I think we had to get out of the class, we had to do either 15. I think it was 15 groups a minute, and I was okay. I got there. I got faster as I got when I got to Vietnam. But so no, Villa Rosa, I didn't get too much remedial training. I'll put it that way.
Wow. Wow. Okay, so you've excuse me, guys. So you've gotten to Cameron Bay. But luckily you've met some old heads or some experienced hands and been led in the correct direction. Once you get, should I say, linked up with special forces or find out you're going to be in the projects, is there any uh in-country training or combat orientation course that would come up later at this time? Or are you immediately identified, volunteer, and whisked away to wherever you're going to get the briefing?
No, that's more. I mean, yeah, that there was nothing additional. There was no additional training at all, and we were there for a few days as we got settled in, and we had to be issued some uniforms and all of that kind of thing, a rifle, and but then after that we went. They parceled us up and sent us out where we needed to go, and I went to Da Nang.
So you did get a rifle then and there already
Yeah,
on your
I carried a just an M16 around for the first few weeks as I was making my way north, I guess you might say. I didn't see a car. I didn't see a car 15 until I got to SOG.
Wow. Okay, that's well, and we'll definitely have questions about your gear. Everybody loves hearing about what exactly y'all had and were doing. There was where we go. You mentioned you went to Da Nang first, or did you end up going to Khe Sanh first? Or no, you have to go to Da Nang to get your briefing.
Right, right, right. Yeah,
Okay.
that's exactly right. You go to Da Nang first, and then they send you out to whatever FOB you're needed at. And I was needed at Khe Sanh.
What was your briefing like when you went in, where is the briefing held exactly in Da Nang? Is it at House 22 or at one of the safe houses or at one of the or
I don't recall where we had the briefing. It wouldn't. I don't think it would have been House 22. It had to be there within the HQ somewhere. But they brought us all in that had volunteered to go to because we were still billeted, and you didn't have to go to Khe Sanh. I mean, they had other jobs that you could do.
mm,
I'm sorry, not Khe Sanh, but CCN
mm.
or CCC or CCS. Uh, so so they asked for volunteers. If you wanted to volunteer, you actually had to go to them and tell them you wanted to do it. So we all got together, and I'm pretty sure it was there in Da Nang and not at House 22. It wouldn't have been a House 22 because I got sent to House 22 because to get ready to go to Khe Sanh.
Ah, okay. That's where I ended up getting mixed up in the flow of your where you would likely end up. So you get every guy's story is a bit different on the briefing, and how informal it is. I've heard guys that ended up at Khartoum getting the briefing from Colonel Apt, and he's in cut off tiger stripe shorts and Ho Chi Minh sandals and his bucket or his boonie recon cap, and other guys are speaking to the colonel themselves, and he's in full fatigues, and it's very formal. What was your introduction to SOG like?
Well, when I got to House 22, I was told that I'd be picked up. Um, I guess you're going to hear part of that story. So that's kind of the way it works, I guess. So here we go. So I was there with John, they call him Smitty, and we were waiting to get picked up by someone from Khe Sanh. We didn't know who, we didn't know anything about it. We'd been there a couple of days, 2 or 3 days, and we hear somebody standing out in the front of the front door. And it was just, House 22 was just, you could hang out, have a beer, take it easy until somebody needed you. So anyway, he was calling Sergeant Estes, Sergeant Smith, Sergeant Tar. Sergeant Tar was a supply sergeant. And let's see here, was there someone? Yeah, there was 3 or 4 of us initially. So he called us our name, and we went out there, and he said, "You're going to Khe Sanh, and I need you guys to take some vehicles up when we go." And he was a supply officer, and his name was Lieutenant Potter. So we went in different directions. One of the guys got a Jeep, and Charlie Tar got a Jeep, and Smitty got something else, and I got the water truck. Not a water truck, a deuce and a half, and but I hadn't got it yet. So Potter put me in the Jeep, and he needed to get out of Da Nang that night because he had a Vietnamese girl that he had picked up in town from one of the mama sons. And he was a supply officer, so he used the money that he had to pay for her. And he was going to, she was a hooker. And he was going to have her entertain all the guys up there at Khe Sanh. He thought it was pretty smart. And so we're in the Jeep, and he's trying to get past the white mice, the Vietnamese guards. And the later in the day it got, the more desperate he became. He was trying to get a road out of town so that he could get into the convoy, so that he could make it over to FOB1-Mai, where that was our stop in between there and Khe Sanh. And so we started driving just like faster and faster. And every time he'd see a roadblock, he'd turn around, peel out, and go back. Well, the girl, she started crying and carrying on. And he had her dress up like she was like a nurse. And he rolled up some blankets in the back of the Red Cross Jeep that we were in, had a fake IV coming down from the ceiling of the ambulance. And so she was looking like she was giving a guy an IV. So he thought he'd probably get a pass. So she started crying and carrying on and saying he was dinky dow, he was dinky dow. And I remember that famous statement you probably heard in one of my other interviews that he told her. He said, "You shut your mouth." He says, "I paid a lot of money for you." And she's looking at me thinking, what am I going to do? And I didn't know what the hell to do. And then finally, we got a clear intersection that we could get out of town. So her, myself, and Potter made it to the convoy. And then the next day we made it to FOB1-Mai. So that was nuts. And I was brand new to Vietnam, looking around, and I'm thinking, man, this place is crazy. And so anyway, we got together, stayed one night, RON at FOB1-Mai, and then headed north to Khe Sanh. So that's it.
And y'all hear it a little more in depth on the on exactly how more so it went down, because y'all got to remember, this is Khe Sanh he's about to drive into, and Mr. Rick is in a were you in a deuce and a half or a 3/4?
I was in a deuce and a half, pulling a trailer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, I was about to say the trailer was full of not only party supplies, but also food and such for Khe Sanh, and as well as the famous Lieutenant Potter bringing a lady of ill repute in to entertain the boys. And it is quite the story, because they get it caught right in the open, and it just goes haywire, and people start showing up wanting to steal stuff. And Mr. Rick's got his his standard issue, just issued M16. He's trying to hold everything at bay, and luckily, finally, even the Marines trying to get in on this, and luckily, old Gunny steps up and joins forces with Mr. Rick, and they clear house and run everybody off, and luckily make it into Khe Sanh unharmed anymore. So
that's you got it about right. We got about halfway to Khe Sanh, and the roads were getting high. They were elevated over the rice paddies, and that big truck and the trailer. I made a wrong turn. I did something wrong, and I flipped the trailer. You know, the trailer full of liquor and rations and all that just flipped over on its side. So that had two effects. It some of the liquor bottles busted, and the brew could smell it. It was near the brew village, or actually it was near Mai Loc, and so they smelled the liquor. They could see what happened, and it also cut the convoy in half. So everybody behind me was stuck in the mud. I had blocked the road, and just as you said, I jumped out there, and the brewer stealing the liquor and running off with it, and I'm threatening to shoot him, and I'm running around the truck and the trailer. So I called the Marines to give me a hand, and the Marines started stealing, and I'm just thinking, shit, this is I don't know. Finally, a Marine gunny came, and he said, "Hey, you guys." he brought him under control and told him to get the hell out of there, and we tipped the trailer back up, but we couldn't go further, so I had to turn around. The rest of my guys that had been picked up in Da Nang, they went on up to Khe Sanh, and that included Potter and the girl, Smitty, Tar. So I was by myself with the Marines, and we had to go back to FOB1, reconstitute it, make sure we could get air cover the next day, because going up to Khe Sanh, you had to have air, and we got the air, and we made it up one day later. So that was the way it finally worked out.
And your entrance in, you still have to get out and immediately run for cover, because it's
no, that's what everybody would tell you. You know, say when you get in Khe Sanh, jump out of the truck and run like hell and get in a ditch, and you hear that, so that's what you do. And there was a good reason for it, because there wasn't much left on Khe Sanh by the time I got there. It had been bombed out looked like the moon.
Mr. Lou to say that I've got Khe Sanh photos, but I wanted to show this training group photo that this is Group A, I believe, from you and Tilt before we get to Khe Sanh, the rest of Khe Sanh. But there's a young
Company
John
A.
Stryker Meyer.
Yeah.
And the old barracks right there.
Yeah.
Wonderful photo. But Lou DeSada was mentioning he had the much same experience, but he did not drive. He was in the back of either a Blackbird or something, and they come in, and he's like, they start to go down, and he's waiting for them to go lower, and he's like, what the heck? They're not going to land. So they come back to him and say, all right, get ready. We're not touching down. You're jumping out of the back, and you better run. And he's what? He's got a duffel bag, all of his stuff from Khantoum, and he immediately grabs everything and basically does a PLF as best he can, and just rolls all over. Gets up, rounds start cracking off and such, and mortar rounds and whatever they've got coming in, and he hits the ditch as hard as he can. And he got there and found out that people had already taken bets to see if he was going to get hit or pinned down on the pad there. I was like, good Lord, have mercy. That what an entrance into Khe Sanh.
I was concerned, when the trailer flipped, we lost some liquor and we lost some rations, and so there was some concern on my part that when I got there, everybody'd be pissed at me for flipping the trailer, but it wasn't me that took the heat. It was Lieutenant Potter. And Colonel Barr had just taken over Khe Sanh, and he didn't. He was, he had a different view on having that girl there in the camp, So he told Potter to get out of he kicked him out of the base the next day, and her too, sent him packing, and Potter never came back. I went down into the bunker, and Potter was standing guard at the time. He was standing guard with a pistol on his sidearm, guarding her. As Colonel Barr made him stand guard over her, and he couldn't talk to me or anything. So he got kicked out of Khe Sanh and didn't come back. He unfortunately he lost his life later in Da Nang.
Dang, I forgot. He's sadly one of the casualties of the
Yeah.
August 23rd sapper attack.
Yep. It's unfortunate. Yeah.
Terrible, a terrible incident. And I believe you had just missed correctly. Had you already DEROSed, or were you not showing, had not shown up to the compound yet?
You mean in Da Nang?
Yes, sir.
When they had the sappers?
Or
Well,
were you
no, I
at
was at Mai Loc. I was at Mai
Mai
Loc.
Loc?
Yeah, I was at Mai Loc.
Gosh, I forgot. You've got so many places you were at so far.
Wait, some of the guys had left the day before and gone down to from Mai Loc for a promotion board, and I know Sergeant Varney was there at Mai Loc, and he went down and he was killed also in that attack.
Mr. Gene Pugh, we were lucky enough to have on, and he spoke at length. I mean, quite literally gave us a 39-minute play-by-play of what he experienced on the ground, and it was tear-jerking and goosebump riddling the entire time. I've never heard anything quite like that, to be honest with you. And thank God for men that were standing up like Pat Watkins and Larry Trimble up on the mountain, and the other men on the ground inside the compound working. I'm blanking on names. Bobby Leather, I believe. There were several that
Bobby was there. Yeah.
Just sad. But you're getting to Khe Sanh, and is Khe Sanh, is this what it's kind of looking like when you're there?
I came in from the other side, but yeah, that looks about it. You can see most everything is underground.
Yeah.
When I got there, I even remember the latrines were underground. So everything was underground. Very little left up above.
Wow. And that is one of John McGovern's photos. What do you happen to do you know if you were at Khe Sanh the same time Mr. John was?
I kind of think I was, but it's foggy to me, and we didn't work closely together at that time because I was a newbie and he was a sergeant, I think, at that time. So
Okay, I was curious because he was there in '68, and again, I'm not all that great on time frame and the likes, but he also much like you, when he ended up leaving, I believe he went straight to, I think, FOB1
yeah.
with Don Walken and all of the guys, but I can't remember exactly.
Well, they split the crew up, and they sent some to Mai Loc and they sent some to FOB1. And I think Sergeant McGovern, he went to FOB1. I went to Mai Loc. I think that's the way it worked.
And what was that like? I mean, being completely underground, for what essentially is, I mean, was it like the 77-day siege? I mean, to where y'all are underground day after day like this?
Yeah, you worked underground, and I was assigned to Como, so I would have been working in a bunker anyway, but yeah, I mean, but the guys that we would take our incoming every day, and it wasn't that big a compound. However, it was nothing like the guys that had been there earlier, that were there from the beginning during the siege. I came as relief for the guys that had, that had their heads rattled pretty badly and had to get out. So I was the relief. So we took rounds, but it was nothing like George Sternberg. You mentioned George Sternberg. He was there the whole time. There were several guys that were there the entire time. I think Rich Maloney. I believe Rich Maloney was there the whole time. So those guys really went through something, and a lot more than I did.
All of you Khe Sanh men went through it. It's that's why we're always glad to have Khe Sanh vets on, because it's just a one, because it's known as the Marine Corps base, although it originally started as an A camp. And as you mentioned with Tilt, the Marines did not like the little people being there at all, and it, quite frankly, it sounded a few times could have gotten dangerous.
Well, when I evacuated, let's see here, how did it work? Well, I don't remember the exact flow of the incident, but we went off of Khe Sanh with some some brew, and they wouldn't let us stay. They wouldn't let us stay on the Marine base because of the brew. So yeah, they didn't like him. They didn't trust him. They had a problem to a pretty large degree with us ourselves, because we were not identified, and we hung out with Vietnamese and brew and Cambodian teams and all that. So that was it was sometimes irritant,
I can only imagine what that like. There y'all are living under the same terrible terrible circumstances and all that, and there y'all are trying to do the same job, and kind of getting flack or ill will and such. I hate that they were kind of like that, but to each their own, I suppose. But there were a few questions about Khe Sanh, if you didn't mind, if it was all right if we brought up for you to answer, if that's all right.
Fine, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Jason Holmes is curious. I would think getting kicked out of Khe Sanh would be a good thing. Total hellhole from what I've heard. From all the stories. That's more of a comment. But how did you train for missions having to be underground for most of the time? Was the indigenous team camp close by, and how much time did you spend with your indig at Khe Sanh?
Now, as I mentioned, I was in Como at the time, so I was working in Como. But no, they they had to come up. They had to come up, and they had to do their training above ground. They couldn't do it underground. So, and there were Marine convoys going outside the camp on a regular basis. So it wasn't as if we were always underground. But when you did come up above ground, you had to be very attentive to the fact that if you heard a slight boom, that there was something on its way, and you had to run for it. And while I was there, we took casualties from it, and that was it. So there's nothing you could do about it,
And
but that didn't affect me personally. I was working in Como.
And did it make it so devastating where they literally just had y'all the mountains lined around Khe Sanh, overlooking the valley, and y'all just completely dialed in the entire
pretty
camp?
Well, yeah, pretty well. They had their guns in place. They had caves that they could use. It was almost impossible to do anything about it. They had good visibility. It was a ways away, so it wasn't like they were, it wasn't too close, but you could hear it coming. And then, once you hear the sound of a rocket coming in, you don't forget that ever. And that was just life at Khe Sanh. Yeah, it was a mess.
And they're using, God, like I said, I just can't even imagine. And are they using mortars? I'm sure pot shots are coming in 122. What are you facing?
They were rockets and mortars, and you could hear the mortars. Like I said, you could hear the mortars as they went off before they hit, and they were coming from a distance. And that was just the life there. That was the life there while I was there. But we didn't stay too long. You know, I wasn't there. We closed Khe Sanh up a couple of months after I got there.
Yeah, and what wasn't literally y'all had a little small portion. There's the marine side, and then y'all have got y'all's
Right.
fenced off, wired off portion that y'all had y'all set up and
Separate
such.
compound. Yeah. Yeah. Separate compound.
Wow.
Adjacent, but separate.
Hmm,
Yeah.
okay. And we've heard Mr. Lou talking about him and Mr. Pat having to hit the trench line a few times and, get ready because they thought, here it comes, they're going to attempt to Din Bin Phu us. And luckily that didn't happen. But
Luckily, it
um,
didn't happen, but it could have happened.
oh, that's every vet that I speak to, that's the impending fear that most of them
Yeah.
said that it could have turned into an immediate Din Bin Phu for us.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
we
That's
we
true.
knew we were lucky to get out when we got out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Jason had an overall question for entering SOG. When Bud, Terry, and I spoke not too long ago, we spoke about 68 being the year, Terry specifically, when he joins Special Forces, being the year a lot of the younger guys started taking leadership roles and stepping up due to the need for warm bodies and new men. Who were some of the men who had been around for a while when you first got to SOG?
Well, when I first got this song, well, let's see here. Clyde Sincere was a CO there at Mai Loc at the time. I actually met Clyde up in Khe Sanh. He was a CO. Joe Conlon was one of the he's a medic there at Mai Loc. I can't remember. Charlie Porter. Well, these are names that you probably don't know. Charlie Porter was at Mai Loc, and then he went to FOB1. If that's kind of what you're after, some of the names these were the next notch up. These were the NCOs when we got there. Clyde was a major at the time. All of the names that you hear, I think you'll hear most of them. But like you said in your question, it is true. We were kind of the fresh blood coming in, and then in the case of Khe Sanh, there had been a lot of people that basically, I think they gave them a free pass. I get them out of there if they wanted to leave. Bob Donahue, I think Bob Donahue went through it, and I think Bob's just. I saw him at Mai Loc. He was at Mai Loc, so he stayed. I don't know if you've interviewed Bob or not, but
Working on getting him lined up to come on.
yeah,
Great man.
yeah.
As a matter of fact, I've got some of his. He's ever so gracious with sharing a few of the men you mentioned, including Mr. Clyde. We've got photos of that I was going to bring up, and there's one where all of y'all are gathered to where I think Miss Clyde had just opened up or just closed out Mai Loc, and y'all are back down at FOB1. But there's Mr. Bob, guys. I'm not sure who the man to our left is, his right, but that's Mr. Bob with a captured SKS right there and AK. And does that look like Khe Sanh mud to you, or does that look like Mai Loc mud to you?
No, I think that's Mai Loc. I think it's Mai Loc. It looks like there wasn't much left up at Khe Sanh. I think it has to be Mai Loc.
I think so. Yep, it is. This is his Mai Loc dumb bud. This is his Mai Loc photo album. I apologize about that. And then there was you were just speaking about Mr. I had a great photo of Pigpen Conlon, but here are some of the men we've mentioned, and I've got the original photo of this, but this actually gives a little more in-depth info. The 6 men gathered on the LZ at FOB1 shortly after they were transferred from FOB3 to FOB1 following the closure of FOB3 in June of '68. Major Clyde Sincere, absolute legend, later opened a launch site at Mai Loc, which was called FOB3. I did not know that it retook on the FOB3 name.
Mai Loc FOB3. Yeah, I guess I've always called it Mai Loc. I never called it an
Yeah.
FOB.
That's the first time I've heard of that as well, even from Mr. Vern and Bob. I always, yeah, a launch site, because Mr. Doug talked about launching. I know Mr. Eldon launched out of there. Heck, I think Vern actually went into North Vietnam with Fitz, Mr. Fitz, before the unfortunate accident.
Yeah, they got shot down.
Mai Loc is a heck of a. We'll be interested in speaking about that. Baltimore Bob had a question for Camo, since we are speaking a little bit about stuff. Can you ask him about Camo windows and how long support could take to get to a team? That could come up later for another part.
Yeah, it just depends on where you're at. It depends on how far you are away. Sometimes some of those targets were quite a ways out, and you had to, it was you had to be real careful. And they would send a covey out, and he's out flying around, and you're real important to stay in contact, because they couldn't come and get you real quickly. On the other hand, some of the closer targets were quick and easy to get to. I'm trying to think of the Air Force. What do we call them? Blue something at night. We also had comms at night if we got in a jam, and that was an Air Force. I think it was well, I'm not sure what it was. I never saw it, but I talked to it, and he would talk to all of the teams that they had radio freaks for, and they'd fly around all night long. So it wasn't part of our operation. It was not part of our operation, but they acted as a relay.
And while we're on the issue of not the issue, but the subject of Camo and mentioning a relay, one of the most outstanding stories, in my opinion, that's been on Sodcast as of yet is I know we might be jumping a little bit ahead, but while we're waiting on questions to come in, could you speak about the just importance of how good your Camo training came in, and how lucky you were with helping Mr. Reggie Gray and Mr. Jennings out of their jam when you were on a separate mission and happened to realize they were under attack?
Sure. And that was actually, it brings into play some of the problems that you got with Camo. It was an FM radio. We both got inserted. We both got inserted in a target that was about. Well, I'm not sure how far it was, and I wasn't going to ask. In the clear. But we knew that we were a few kilometers apart, and I got inserted along with Chuck Willoughby, and Chuck and myself and a captain that I can't remember his name. We took up a position where we could see down into the Ho Chi Minh Trail and monitor traffic. Jennings came in. I think he came in a little bit before me. He called me up on the radio and told me that he was on the ground not too far away. Then later on that afternoon, he came under attack. Well, we were quite a ways away. I mean, to get support there was not an easy matter. And he came under attack. He couldn't move. And pretty quickly he was surrounded. And that's when he took a bullet in the back of his radio and hit his, it took a bullet in his battery. Well, the situation is that he didn't know that that's what had happened. But what was happening is he'd tried to transmit, and his transmissions were getting shorter and shorter, and he couldn't transmit out to anybody except for myself. So I was his relay, and he would relay to me, and then I'd relay the message on to Covey. Well, I'm trying to tell him to keep his head, and he's at this point now. They set fire to his location. They're trying to overrun him. You could hear the bullets flying on the radio as I'm talking to him, And I was afraid that if I talked too much on the radio, then our position would be given away. And this went on into the night. And at that point, I figured, I looked over to Chuck and I kind of gave him the throat cutting sign. And I thought that Jennings was finished. And that was Reg Gray was with him, because I didn't see how the fight could go on. He had started to get low on ammo and he was having to use his pistol. And the weather had been bad for me. It was bad for him. Couldn't get him out. But he did make it through the night. And I didn't give away my position. And I found out that he had got exfilled. I think one of his men got, one of his brew got hung on the ropes as they went out. So he'll have one KIN. I think he had one wounded, but all in all, they made it through. And Reg Gray was new at the time. He was him and Jennings. There was only 2 Americans on the team. And Reg was a Spec 4 at the time. He was a young guy just coming in, just getting started. So, but they both made it through, and I was their relay, and that's kind of the way it went. So, if you talk on the phone too much, sooner or later, you're going to say the wrong thing, and somebody's going to hear you. And they knew we were up there. They knew that from just being inserted, they knew we were somewhere up in the rocks, but they couldn't find us. And we ended up being stuck there for 10 days. So anyway, that's kind of how I relayed for Jennings, and he survived and went on to run more missions. So,
I mean, there the round or the battery source takes a round, and you're still able to get enough info. And thank goodness, you think, as you said, you give the throat cut indication thinking you've lost him, and thank goodness after it subsided, even though they've set the place ablaze, he managed to get a new battery in there to keep.
He had a backup battery. He figured out what happened, but he didn't know where it was. He was rattled. He was under attack. He couldn't find the damn thing. And but he finally did find it and got it in there. And then he had radio again. And I think that was later that night, because after we signed off and it was pitch black, that was the last time I talked to him until I got back to FOB1.
Holy cow. And you, as you said, you guys ended up staying, I think, what equated to 10 total days on the ground. Is that same one?
Yeah, that's what happened. We couldn't get out because of bad x-ray, bad weather. And they tried to pull us at about day 5, but they come out there and we were clouded in, and we ran out of chow, we ran out of water, we ran out of everything, because it wasn't supposed to be, 3, 4, 5 days was what we expected. So for water, we ended up having to drink out of mud puddles. That was all we had. So I joke about that when they talk about Agent Orange, and I said, yeah, I was out there in Agent Orange. I probably drank it too, but they finally were able to get us out. But it wasn't easy. They had to come up, and we had to kind of jump onto the chopper from the edge of the rocks. But they did, and they took a round or two in the skin of the chopper, and that was it. We made it back. I was one of the last guys in. Anyway, what happened was I went to get on the floor of the chopper. My leg was tucked underneath, and it went dead on me while we were being transported back. And the guys had sent out some sandwiches and beer on the chopper for when, if and when they got us, So we were drinking beer and eating sandwiches on the way back. I tried to get out of the chopper. My leg was completely dead at the time, and was hopping around on one leg, and then it finally came back to life. But anyway, they thought enough to send us some chow. So we were drinking and eating on the way back.
I bet that was probably the best sandwich and beer y'all had probably ever had.
Oh yeah, that was yeah. And the guys were waiting on the LZ back at football.
I can only imagine that sight, what that must feel like for you guys when having all everybody out there waiting on y'all's safe return.
Yeah, it was a welcome sight, boy. That was a welcome sight.
I love the photos y'all have of the guys big missions, or people thinking like you that maybe something's wrong, and then they come back and it's literally everybody just hands up in the air, guys waiting to throw beers in your hands and get your gear off and carry it for you. It's the camaraderie is just bar none. I mean, you can't find anything like that anywhere else in the world.
No, you can't.
With you being and if I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly, anytime even when you ran your team, you carried the radio your whole SOG career.
Yeah. That just
okay.
You didn't have to, but it's a handy thing to have.
I was about to say, with your training and
put up with the extra weight. Yeah.
That's amazing. And another story to tie in commo before some of the other questions come up. There was just crazy, and I've never heard of anything else that I can think of happening much like this. But I believe this is when you've gotten to CCN, if I'm not mistaken, and you're with Crusader, and y'all are, again, you're on the ground for the DMZ op. Y'all are looking and with field glasses literally right there at North Vietnam, and seeing brew porters carrying supplies.
Mm-hmm.
And if I remember correctly, you get so bad that there's NVA trying to mess you up, but you actually have to use an ERC-10 and may have gotten in contact with a commercial pilot. Could you tell us all about that? That is insane.
Well, we were in the DMZ. We had got ourselves settled in on a pretty good spot, and we were up on a rock outcropping. And I'm certain it was Bingham. It was Bingham that I was with. And we had a brew team, and we had been in place over a day. We were into our second day, and we were watching just what you said. We were watching the crossings, the brew porters, material crossing the river. Well, they knew we were up there. Of course, when you have a chopper hover, and they knew the insertion had taken place. They just didn't know where it was at. We had a tracker, an NVA tracker on us, and he got close, or he got up too close. And like a lot of times, these guys have got malaria. I don't know if he had malaria or not, but he coughed. And when he coughed, the brew picked up where he was at and pointed out, that, and then we let him have it. We killed him. And he got way too close. He was only just a few yards from the perimeter of our RON. So we brought him into I say brought him in, we drugged the body into the RON and took any intelligence that we could off. We had actually considered bringing him back, with us, but it didn't, just couldn't be done. So he stayed there. And the chopper, well, once that happened, I'm getting myself a little bit out of sorts here. Once that happened, once we fired off, then we gave away our position, and we had no place to go. We couldn't, we were pretty much at the top of the mountain on a rock outcropping, and we had to get out of there. So we took the FM radio and tried to call for help, and I wasn't getting any response. I'd call and nobody would answer. I didn't get any kind of reply. And I figured it didn't take me too long to figure that I was probably being jammed. And then it became clear that I was being jammed because I could hear the guy. And then as this thing moved along, finally, he was so damn clear and close, I would have swore that he was within a few feet of the perimeter. He might not have been, but it sounded like it. It sounded like two radios that are just a few feet away, and you can hear the crackling over the FM, the transmission. So at that point, he and I kind of get into a cuss fight, and just I don't know why I did it. I shouldn't have, but I did. And he was jamming me with a lot of that kind of thing, a lot of, just
filthy language.
Filthy language, whatever. He was just jamming the freak. So the brew then, at this point now, it's gone on too long. I mean, they knew when they killed that tracker that we were in trouble, and they were expecting the Americans to get them out of there. Well, the Americans weren't able to get them out of there because our frequency was jammed. So at that point, when I realized the situation, that's when I pulled out the ERC-10, and a kind of a desperation. I'd never used it before, and I wasn't sure that the damn thing even worked. But that's what happened. I got the ERC-10 out and keyed it on, and then I just put out a broadcast, and I said, any station. This is an American unit, and we're under attack. We're receiving incoming fire, and I broadcast that out several times, and then lo and behold, I get this voice, and it says unknown station. This is a commercial aircraft flying over Vietnam. And I told him, I gave him our S3's freak in the clear, and I said, call him and tell him that we're under attack here. And it was our S3 headquarters. And we got to get us out because we're surrounded and we're taking incoming. So that's what happened. And the chopper did come and get us, and they brought in some gunships and suppressed the fire around us. And we could hear them now. At this point, we could hear the North Vietnamese. They were moving up the hill. They were moving towards us. So the chopper came in. He took a few rounds. He hovered up against the rocks. We jumped in and we got the hell out of there. And no casualties. So that was it. But I really, at that point, I didn't know what was going to happen. And it was only later that I figured out some of these sequences. But they had us jammed up, and we couldn't transmit. So that little ERC-10 came in handy. It did exactly what it was supposed to do.
I mean, that's so crazy. When I heard you say that a commercial pilot came over the air and was helping. I mean, that's the first time I've ever heard of anything like that happening. That is absolutely amazing. And is it correct? Is this the one where y'all were in such a predicament that when the choppers did finally get there, that the chopper had to hover on rocks or near rocks to where y'all were here and had to actually jump into the aircraft?
No, that was it. Yeah. We had come in by foot earlier, but we couldn't go out that way. The only thing that we could do was ask the chopper to direct him in, and he came in and he hovered right up against the rocks. We took a jumped in the chopper and took off. One chopper.
One chopper for the whole team.
Yeah, for the whole team. Yeah. Lucky.
Yes, sir. My goodness, have mercy. You've definitely been in some pucker factor inducing moments, to say the least. I mean, good gracious.
Well, that particular one was fell into that category. Yeah.
Those DMZ ops sound like they were just dreadfully dangerous.
Yeah, they could be, because the NVA knew you were in there. They didn't know exactly where, and it was very dangerous for them to come after you and be wrong and run into you. So they were leery, they were wary. Yeah. But they knew you were there. It was just a matter of time. before they found you.
Wow. I'm not seeing the question come up, but people are always curious about were you a Car 15 man? Did you try any foreign weapons? Did you
Well, I was a Car 50. I thought that was the best weapon in the world, and I loved that thing. And I had a rope on it, and I slung it over my neck, and it hung there at exactly the right spot. I could sleep with it. It was with me all the time, So yeah, I didn't use any foreign weapons at all.
Wow.
And it was simpler too, because all of your ammo now is, it's all the same.
What was your some of the guys have astronomical loadout numbers. What was your basic mag count loadout that you take?
I think I had 18 magazines, either 18, I think, depending, 18, and if I had another, because I stuffed them in the canvas canteen covers. And I'm thinking that it was either 18 or 24, but 18 was my standard. And then I had 2 pouches of grenades. I had a smoke. I had, I was weighted down. I mean, when we got off the choppers, my legs would bow, and I'd kind of get myself situated, and then kind of amble off at a pretty slow rate. So there was a lot of weight, a lot of stuff. A lot of ammo.
Not to mention that radio on your back.
Not to mention the radio on the back. I did not take. I think I took it once or twice, an M79. You could do that, but then if you do that, then you got to have the ammo for it, and that's just more weight. And I had enough, so that was it for me. Not much food. I stripped my food down to almost nothing. I had those rice. All I had was rice packs. Yeah, I didn't bring anything else. I'd eat rice when I was out in the field.
Were you a guy that carried a sidearm, or?
Yeah, I'd carry a pistol.
45, or
Yep.
was it a
45?
Yeah.
45, yeah.
Did you? A lot of guys say they had issues with theirs or preferred the Browning. Did you? Did you have good luck with your 45?
No, I didn't have any issues with it. I never fired it in combat.
Wow, that's a good thing then.
yeah, I didn't use it. I probably have been better off if I hadn't taken it, but I did out of habit.
That's amazing. And I know there's one more story I'll get to ask you about before we start closing. But considering you've got some great interviews out there that will answer a lot of people's questions, but there are 3 right here that folks are curious about. CCC guys were rotated on the radio relay sites, and Jason Holmes was curious, with you being a commo man, did you spend any times at the radio relay sites like Hickory or any of the sorts?
No, let's see here. No, once I went to a team, I was no longer commo. It was kind of hard to get out of it, but once I got out, it's not that I refused to go and do radio relay site work, but no, I didn't do any. I got put up on top of Marble Mountain, but that was just routine guard duty, actually, was all that was. So no, I wasn't. I stopped in at Hickory once, and I think all we were doing is just dropping them off some supplies, some chow and stuff like that. I didn't stay there.
Okey-dokey. And I think I've got a picture of the guys up on Hickory that I'll try and find real quick. But a lot of people are curious about Mai Loc and the minigun. Jason said when we had Vern Ward on and Roger Lockshear talking about giving y'all y'all trading or getting the minigun for camp defense at Mai Loc. How did that come about? And he bet some serious trading was going on for that.
Yeah, I didn't. I took that picture, and I think I sent you the picture. I believe I did anyway, of the minigun. But I remember, my recollection is exactly the same, that they swapped it. They swapped for it, yeah. And I don't know what they traded it for. I didn't have anything to do with it. I just thought it was cool as hell to have it. And because Mai Loc was kind of like hanging out there. And if anybody needs a minigun, we needed it, you know. So so that was it. And I took that picture.
Do you happen to know who's behind the
No,
gun?
no, I don't know who that is. I saw some comments on the internet, and they were trying to figure out who it was too. But I can't tell you. I don't know. I
I've
knew him then, but I don't now. So
we've been asking Roger, Vern, and some other guys, and we've gotten a few names, but we haven't got anything nailed down as of yet to be positive to put it down for a name.
yeah.
But that is a wonderful photo. In fact, there's a few good Mai Loc photos of you. Well, here's I believe you took this one as well. Is
Oh yeah,
Bob
that's
and
Bob
we're
Donahue. Do you know? I don't know the name of that lieutenant, but he was a lieutenant. Do you know it?
it's on here and I'm blanking on the name. I thought it started with a B. I'll look and find it, but he's actually he spoke about him on the on our when we had him on, and I can't remember it. Not Kara Garland, that was Special Forces man, not Matson. There's Kara. Was it Lieutenant Buchanan?
You know what? It could be Buchanan because there was
Okay.
a Lieutenant Buchanan. It could easily be Buchanan. Yeah.
I think it is. I'm looking at a photo of him right now loading parachutes, and I think it might be Lieutenant Buchanan. But that is was so most of y'all's teams were Mai Loc all brew teams, or was everybody on the base brew?
I would say no, but it could have been true. That's an interesting question. I don't have the answer for that. When the cooks, all the help inside the camp were brew, but when they dismantled Khe Sanh, they had VNs there, and they sent them off in different directions. So I'm pretty sure you'd have some Vietnamese teams there at Mai Loc. But yeah, it was close to the brew village. So the help was brew. I know that.
I heard an interesting story about either the Mai Loc or the Lang Vei village chief's son needing protection, basically, I guess, during Tet or the lead up to Tet, and he being sent to either FOB1 or 4 for security, and that's where y'all got y'all's dog. I think Dumb Shit, the one that sadly walked through the minefield and got blown up.
That had to be that had to be before my time. That had to be before my time, I guess.
I think it was after when Tilt and them came back for his second tour. I think.
Okay, there you go. That would make sense.
There was a Mai Loc because y'all had to. I always find it funny, especially at Khe Sanh. There's the medical tent, but I'll show this. This is Spartan living quarters for Special Forces men right here.
There we go. That was
so
me. That's me and John Driscoll's hooch. That didn't work out worth a damn, but it lasted for a while. But it leaked like a sieve, and I don't know where I went after that. But anyway, that was Driscoll and my quarters for a while. I kid Clyde Sincere about his BEQ there at Mai Loc, and so we just had to make do at the time.
Is wonderful. And speaking of Clyde, here's
there's the man. Yeah,
some of the guys. I'm not sure if this is at FOB1 or 4, but everybody's gathered around chewing the fat. There was one more two more questions. I'm sorry, I got mixed up looking at all these great photos. Kyle Smith is curious, when you first experienced your combat in SOG, did you have any doubts or was it everything you wanted it to be?
I I think it was everything that I wanted it to be. When I got into combat, or when I went out to combat, there was a kind of a mindset that went in, and I'll bet you that if you talk to a lot of the guys, it might be similar. But I would start through a routine the day before as I get ready, and I'd go through and I'd kind of focus in on what was going to be coming up the next day. And then once I got there, once I got into the chopper, you might say, or once I got ready to get into the chopper, I'm not quite sure when exactly when. My mind was totally on the fight. It was totally on the fight. I didn't think back. I didn't think about it. I didn't worry about it. If somebody had, was going to come out swinging, and when you got back to the base, it was great. It was great to be back. To use the word exhilarating, I think that's probably pretty darn close. It was great to be back. It was you did it again, and so I would say it came closer to being everything that I had hoped for. Because you don't know until you do it. So I came close to staying over another tour like Tilt did. And Tilt and I came back together pretty much there at Fort Devens. And him and Jeffrey Junkins, and there's several of the guys went back. I got married. I went in the other direction and moved to California. But anyway, yeah.
Wow. And I'll save that one for after we get the viewers to close out. Did you hear stories from previous missions of the men you were around while at the, I'm going to start saying while at the various CNC bases or FOBs, like Lynn's October 5th mission with ST Alabama, or maybe when teams were overrun? Were those things talked about in the club or on base?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. To answer your question, yes. And actually, if you talked about some of these things and some of these problems, it was healthy to know what was going on out there. And so the guys would trade information. They'd trade what worked and what didn't work. You knew where the really hot targets were. You knew how to, So to answer the question, yes, we did. We traded information and we listened pretty damn close. And the club was a very good place for a lot of that to take place. And it did.
That's come up at probably in every interview we've done, or every person we've had on that's been in SOG, saying no matter what CNC, FOB, or what have you, the best place to learn, of course, other than OJT and being in the field, is being absolutely being in that club. Don't have to be drinking, because some of the guys didn't drink, but being in there, listening to the experienced 1-0s, or even other team members that had run missions and were there talking about their failures or stuff that worked for them.
Yeah. Most of them drank, by the way.
Yeah, I was about to say there are few and far between that weren't. And I was about to say, being a 23-year-old kid, who the heck can blame you after what you're doing? I mean, come on. Jason was curious. This will be a good one. I would love to hear this as well. Did you become very close with your Indig? What were some emotions you had when you finally left the team to go back to the world?
I hated to. I hated to go. I did become close with them. They were the greatest, and they were happy. People talk about all the misery and all that kind of thing that people go through, but yeah, they gave me tokens of what do you say, goodbye presents, or as I left, and I just, I hated to go. And for many years, I thought, how could I get back to see them? And some of the guys, they didn't go back to see a particular team, but they did go back to Mai Loc, or go back to different indigenous villages and try to find them. But you know what? I'm going to try to do something here. I'm not sure if it's going to show up, but I'm going to, some of the keepsakes that they gave me. Can you see the knife and the pipes and the bracelet?
Oh,
Can you see
yes,
that?
sir.
Yeah,
Wow.
that was my going away. That's what the guys gave me that right before I left. So
Oh, that is amazing. Wow.
I kept them, framed them up, and kept them all these years. I don't know what claw that came. He gave me a claw off of a big cat, and I have no idea what kind of a cat it was, but it was a damn big one. So
Did you take part in the were you inducted into the Brew tribe that your men were in? Did you get your Montagnard bracelet and the whole ceremony that would go on?
no, I didn't go. There was no ceremony. They took me to the village and got me drunk. And the mama sons made me made dinner. It was but no, we had no formal ceremony. I had a good time though.
Well, that's good nonetheless. At least that's and the Brewer always an interesting troop, and especially y'all being up at CCN and some of the other CCC didn't really have any, CCS didn't really have any, so getting to hear from y'all, and Nick Brockhausen speaks about his brew team, which is a great getting to hear about them. They sounded like they were outstanding in the woods, so to speak, as y'all say.
Yeah, very, very, very comfortable out there, and very relaxed. And they knew what they were. It was a very home sweet home kind of a thing. I mean, they were very comfortable in the jungle. Yeah, they were good. Those were good troops. They were excellent troops. Brave, loyal to the Americans. Very good.
What were I mean, they're all young, but did you have some really young guys on your team?
Yeah,
What were
we had a 16-year-old, but he wasn't. He wasn't. He was an honorary team member, and he was an orphan kid by the name of
oh
Joe, CHO Joe. I've got his picture somewhere, and he was 16, kind of a cut up and a screw up, but he was one of the boys, and so they kept him back. He wasn't allowed to go out. But they were all about my age, give or take, with a couple of exceptions. We had one guy that he was probably in his mid 30s, and he had fought with the French. And we had another guy that was probably in his 40s, but the rest of the team were like 19, 20, 21, 22, something like that.
wow.
01 was probably 30 or pushing 30. He was the older, settled one. His name was Lynn.
Let me see. I've got a few photos. I've got you and with the guys, but I think I've got a few single shots of some of the guys I was going to bring up for the guys to see
Yeah.
your team.
Yeah. Nuong, Nuong, I think. Yeah. Good guy. M79.
The Thumper Man.
Yeah. Yep.
I've got one of a double, and I think one of the guys is wearing. Nope, I don't have that one. One of them's got y'all. Y'all gave him one of y'all's berets to wear.
Well, the guy on the left was the point, and he was. I thought more of him. I mean, I just thought the world of him. And the other fellow, well, his name was a Yoy, as I remember it, Ayooi, and Ken on the left. Jason Hardy. Jason, I think, got some documentation on Ken, but he was great, and he was point. He was point. Tough little guy.
Again, guys, there the mention of Jason. If you do not have his books, guys, you really need to get into it. They're expensive, but if you're a SOG fan or keep wanting to learn more, you need to buy his books, because this is actually from Jason Hardy's books, and it has one of the documents literally that Mr. Rick wrote to where he could go visit his family, if I'm not mistaken. This is a pass, is it right?
Yeah, we needed it for some reason, and Jason just wanted that pass, and I'm glad that he did it, because he documented it. That was the benefit of Jason having it, because he like you said, his books are great, and this one here, it kind of confirms what I was saying in the age. It looks like that he was a year younger than I was. I was born in 47, and he was born in 48. So, and that was pretty typical.
Wow.
We were all about the same age.
Just kids out there doing stuff that if a ODA detachment commander or something tried to get permission to do, like jumping in North Korea or something, you'd be checked for mental illness and trounced out of the army. I love hearing the guys speak about y'all, and it's like, there's no way we could do what they were doing back then.
Look at that.
Yeah. Love that photo.
Yeah. That was Doug and
y'all's Marble Mountain watchouts.
Yep. Pulling duty.
Yeah. And I could just keep going through photos, but I wanted to show one more photo, and I'm gonna have you close out with these questions. And I wanted to show your team with you, because people had been curious about your team altogether. Let me pull this up, and we'll get to the last few questions. Thank you for bearing with me, guys. I apologize. Got a lot of stuff here. There's Mr. Rick right there.
Yeah. The fellow on the left it would be my right. He was the one of the older guys, and he was one of the most experienced guys. And I'm going to say that his name was Dong, D-O-N-G. The guy on my left is Tolo, and he's the one that was the older one, and Tolo had been pretty wealthy at one time, and he had elephants, and he had several wives, and things were pretty good. Then down there kneeling is Nuong on my right, far right. That's Ken in the middle, the one that we were talking about there with that pass. I don't know why he looks so dark. He really wasn't that dark. And then that's the 01 on my far left, leaning down there. And he was probably 30, and his name was Lin, L-I-E-N. That's how I spelled it anyway. So, yeah. There's more of the team. We didn't take the whole team out that day, but
that's what I was interested in seeing. You've got, and especially in Jason's books, guys, if you're wanting to, his website is called The Dog Tag, and you can get most of his books, although several of them are sold out. But volume 3? Yes, volume 3 has RT Crusader, which features Mr. Rick, and it's got photos, history, and all kinds of amazing stuff. But let's see. We've got one or two questions, and then I've got a question, and I think that'll be about it. I don't want to hold you too much longer, because you've been very gracious with your time. Kyle, what do you think is the best attribute, mentally or physically, for a SOG operator to be successful in the field?
To be successful in the field. I'm not sure if it's the right word. There has to be a very, very high level of determination. Stubbornness might be part of it, but determination, you must be determined to complete the mission. You have to have that drive, and that you can't cave. You've got to, and sometimes it happens where people cave, but to be successful in this kind of thing, like I said, from starting usually on the day before, nothing else was in my head except coming home, coming back, accomplishing the mission, coming back. And I think the guys, probably if you talk to them, I'll bet you that most of them said the same thing. So to me, that determination, stubbornness, single-mindedness,
That's absolutely. There's two more, and then I had one teammate question, and then one just overall, and then we'll let you close it out. Jason is curious, who was the funniest man you were around while you were in SOG? Doesn't matter. We'll count it CCN, Mai Loc, FOB1, Khe Sanh. He says he feels like Tilt and the French one were pretty hilarious.
They were, but they were not the funniest. I think Lynn Black had that effect on me. Lynn, Doug Letourneau, the Frenchman, he was always cutting up, and so was Tilt. But that damn Lynn Black, I just enjoyed the hell out of his sense of humor, and still do, as a matter of fact. So that's my take as Lynn. He was always up to something, and he loved to blow stuff up, and so he did a lot of that. So anyway, and Tilt and Lynn are still around, still with us. So.
Yep, I lucky to have. I don't know if you're in the group, and I've got to get you in the group. If you're not, that little private group I run with just the SOG men, family members, and some of the guys on here. And I've finally gotten Lynn and Tilt in there, but there's the three amigos right there.
You see what I mean? They're screwing around. They always screwed around, and so anyway, there's I don't know what Lynn's doing, but
he's flapping like a bird and pulling his best Freemason pose, tucking it in his shirt like he's a Civil War general.
There you go. There you go.
What a young group of men just out there living life and enjoying it. Love those photos of y'all. Love them. I was curious to close it out on because I've had you an hour and a half now. I was curious because folks that are new, and we're getting new people every day, which I'm happy to get new people to hear about y'all, to buy the books. Could you maybe go into just a little bit of the time you strap hung with Idaho when Tilt was actually 1-0 and Lynn was 1-1, and there happened to be an ankle injury and a new lieutenant flying Covey?
Well, Tilt was the 1-0. So, and I was the guy just strap hanging. I can remember Tilt to say that he was frustrated with that lieutenant. He was cussing at him. He was madder than hell. The guy wouldn't cooperate. He wouldn't pull us. We had an injury, and I wasn't running anything. I was just the guy there. And Lynn was screwing around out in the field too, and that's just the guy's nature. He was having, you're out there and you're having fun. So I guess probably of the frustration that the Covey, and I don't know if Tilt remembers who the Covey was, or if he remembers the lieutenant's name. But anyway,
still not found out.
Yeah. Well, we finally got pulled out, but. I strap hung at that point because when we came into country together, Tilt stayed there at FOB1 and I went to Khe Sanh. Well, he went on to a team, and he wasn't the only one that went on to a team. And I went into Como, and I was I'm not bragging about it, but I mean I was relatively good. I did it enough to where I got pretty functional, and so that's what you need, And everything that we sent was top secret, and it was sent through Morse code, and so it took somebody that could do it. So it was kind of hard for me to get out. So I strap hung anytime I could. Any team that was going out and they needed an American, I'm saying I'll do it, So for a while that was kind of what people kid me about it, You're always going out But I was the guy that was just there to help, or if you know what I'm saying. You can't go out there by yourself. So, and we were short of men. So sometimes to get even two guys, two Americans, a lot of the teams went out with two Americans. So anyway, that's my memory. I remember mostly more than anything else. Tilt mentions how cold it was. I remember the guy's leg injury, and I remember Lynn horsing around, and I remember Tilt calling that lieutenant every name in the book. So that's my memories of that operation. So.
And guys, y'all read the book because he's been gracious enough to leave it out, and I'll leave it out for y'all to get the particulars. But they leave a nasty little surprise for the NVA, and Tilt's way of getting out is quite hilarious because he uses a very unconventional method, and it works like an absolute charm. And like Mr. Rick said, when they both got back, I felt like Mr. Rick was calming both Lynn and Tilt down because both of them were livid. That's the understatement of the century, to be quite frank with you.
Well, he was just as, but he wasn't on the radio. Tilt had the radio, and so he's the one that was arguing, fighting and carrying on. So. And then the little surprise. Yeah, they can read the book for the little surprise that we left when we got picked up.
Great stuff. And as I said, I'm going to link your interviews. Oh, let's get this question because Jake's a great guest, and he has family that were 20th TAS. He was curious, did you happen to work or know if you were working with the 20th TAS out of CCN, the Covey group?
No, I can't really say that I do. I might have and not realized it, but I can't really say that I did. I remember the 20th TAS at all.
And I know they worked up there, and I know one man in particular we've had on the channel, Don Fulton, who worked at CCC. But he was curious, CCN wise. You were at CCN in 68, is that correct? Or 69?
No, 68, 69, yeah.
68, 69. Yeah. Okay. He was just curious about that. Okay. Last question here will be JD's. JD was curious, what was Tilt like on the ground as a team leader? Seeing him now laugh and cut up, it's hard for me to realize him any other way except for that.
No, Tilt was a good 1-0. He took to it naturally, and I think you were talking about. I was asked that question about was combat everything that I thought it would be, and I think Tilt. I think he liked it. He enjoyed it. I don't know. You could ask him that. Maybe he's been asked that before, but he took to it naturally, and had he stayed 1-0, he didn't begin as a 1-0, but he became a 1-0 and stayed until we left, and then he went back for some more. So I thought it was a good 1-0, and you got the skills, and you also got to have the right attitude, and you got to be tough, and he was.
What a great team to come in with Spider Parks, Don Walken, and the Indigs they had to teach him recon.
He was lucky. Yeah, he was lucky in that respect because he had good people to learn from. And because coming out of Fort Bragg or Fort Gordon, there's no preparation for what we did, So he was lucky. Yeah.
I was very surprised to hear later on, maybe around 70-ish. I have to verify with Howard Sugar. I made a post on it, but they actually started once they figured out the projects and all that were not quite a secret, were more known about, and guys were finding out they were going to be in the project. They had a simulated recon teams leader course at Bragg that actually Mr. Eldon Bargewell was a part of.
Yeah. There was a lot learned there. There was a lot that was picked up, but I mean, there was a lot of knowledge. I'm glad that they did that.
Absolutely. It's amazing to see the schools that started popping up just besides that to help guys. I recently learned that there was a Hatchet Force 1-0 course, or not a 1-0 course, but a Hatchet Force team leader course as well as the 1-0 course, which is Outstanding. And you're actually one of the few outstanding 1-0s that did not go to 1-0 school. Is that correct?
I didn't go to 1-0 school. No,
Wow.
no.
That's amazing. You hit the ground running though, so
I hit the
that's
ground
the
running.
kind of that's to
Well, it
be
was
expected.
yeah, seat of the pants kind of a thing, you know. It's not
OJ
we didn't have a lot
OJT
of
at its
extra bodies, you know. So we did what we had to do.
OJT at its finest.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Um, I've got one more. There's Mr. Rick coming out of the
Oh,
Crusader
posing,
hooch.
yeah.
Yeah, and I was honored enough that you signed to that photo for me, or you sent me one because mine was garbage, and you actually printed one off and sent me one to add to my collection.
Good.
But I will close out this. Tilt's always had me interested in from this specific photo. Actually, you're gonna have to close with talking about Mr. Irons, but I was curious. Did this happen very often? A inspection either by the brass pre-mission or by the camp CO or anything? I believe this is when they were going to attempt to go to the Mugia Pass, or I'm not sure, but you've got the colonel, and I think there might be a general there inspecting them. And there's the
Yeah, this was not anything that ever happened to me or anything that I ever saw personally. I think that's Tilt at the tail end.
yeah, that's Tilt and Lynn right here.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So that's almost as if they were did they receive medals at that time? Was that a formal?
No,
That's
sir. As I'm learning, as you can see, Lieutenant Byrne, I think Mac and Doug Letourneau there with them.
yeah.
At last, I believe they were. This is going into either the DMZ or the Mugia Pass, and I think it was scrubbed at the last minute. And I think they were
Well,
coming to.
I don't think they got involved in the Mugia Pass. I was fragged for the Mugia Pass, but it never happened. You know. No, I think this is earlier on. This is earlier on.
Oh wow.
So
Okay. I was curious because I've not seen any other teams have be in full
no,
combat about to cross the border and have the generals come or colonels come look them over like that.
no, I haven't either. I haven't either. It never happened to me.
Wow. Okay. And to close it out good though. Okay, everybody was just saying thankful we've had you on today. As am I. I've been looking forward to this forever. Could you speak a little bit about Mr. Floyd Iron and what he was like as a teammate?
Floyd was a. I think you've seen me make the comment. He was tough, you know.
Mm.
Floyd had been a wrestler. I think he had even gone to Japan with the Oklahoma wrestling team. He was an Osage Indian. Good guy. He loved to party. He loved to drink. He loved to fight. But he didn't fight his teammates, and he and I got along just fine. And we got along great. He was great to have on a team. I never went. He got assigned to my team towards the tail end, but I had been with Floyd all the way through training group. Um, Fort Gordon, Georgia, came over there, so it was. I knew him. I knew him really well. I'm sorry that he passed away before I got a chance to see him again, but he's gone now. But anyway, Floyd was a good guy. Was tended to be pretty quiet, and like I said, he was. Don't mess with Floyd. Leave him alone. Good guy.
He definitely looks like the prototypical Green Beret right there.
Yep,
He
yep,
looks like he's bad news bears.
yep, he was good guy.
Wow. I've again, guys, I'm gonna have the show notes linked for the Joe Galloway interview that was done at SOAR, and I'm gonna have the link to Tilt's podcast to where y'all can hear those two these two guys catch up and have a good time. It was a great episode. And by the way, if you're wanting to learn more about Mr. Rick and his team, again, Jason Hardy's books. You can't fail. Price is high, but you cannot fail with buying Jason Hardy's books.
Great
And
book.
Absolutely. And I've got to say again, thank you, Mr. Rick. I know I've been a bother since we first met at SOAR, but I'm forever in your debt for you sitting down and sharing with us. We
Well,
have been honored to have you today.
it's been a pleasure. Been a pleasure, bud.
Wonderful, wonderful. And unless there's anything you'd like to say or share, we'll cut it out for the day.
All right. Had a good
All
time.
right.
Thanks a lot.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You have a great day, and I'll be in touch.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.